Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello friends, today on the show, as a master electrician and lighting tech in the entertainment business, she's a woman working in what has traditionally been a man's world. From the Academy Awards to live events and international conferences like E3, she's part of an integral team of people that make everything look amazing so we can enjoy it. Whether it's climbing rigs, laying thousands of feet of electrical cable, or setting up all the various lights and gizmos that have to work, she not only does this as a woman in a man's world, but she's done it fully pregnant twice. In addition to working and raising 2 kids, she's also a stand-up comedian who loves to make people laugh. She has a passionate love for the outdoors with a goal of visiting every national park in the United States in her lifetime. Please welcome, zooming in from down the street here in Los Angeles, Michelle Marie Maxwell. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming in. So how are you doing?
I am, I guess, to be expected. As good as everyone else is feeling. We are in the time of COVID-19 as we record this. So
how has the stay-at-home order been for you guys?
Well, it came at an interesting time for our family because I just gave birth about 6 weeks ago as the recording of this podcast takes place.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He's happy and healthy and grunts like an old man. But I luckily got out of the hospital before the actual shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
So we've kind of been in our own version of newborn quarantine, but I guess heightened by the fact that no one is leaving. So no one has really met our child. No one can, they always say for new moms, get your friends over to cook you meals or just hold the baby while you take a shower. And there's none of that.
None of that.
Just the 2 of us. Well, now just the 4 of us. I do have a 2-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. The 2-year-old's my husband. I'm just kidding. No, I have a 2-year-old and a newborn. So it's been interesting.
That's cool. Where are you from originally?
I am from just outside of Washington, D.C. I'm from Maryland. Typically, we all say we're from D.C. when we're really not. So.
I worked in D.C. actually back in the day in Greenbelt for digital.
Oh, yeah. I worked... Well, I've been everywhere, but I would say in general, I'm from Rockville, Maryland.
It's a beautiful state, I will say.
Beautiful state and delicious crabs.
Oh. What did you want to be when you grew up in Maryland? What did little Michelle want to be?
I wanted to be a veterinarian for sure the first time. And then I don't remember who opened my eyes to the world that you have to unfortunately euthanize animals sometimes. I quickly went to the world of wanting to act. So when I was little, I definitely loved performing, acting, dancing, singing, any of those, avenues.
And that led you into stand-up comedy?
That did. That's actually why I moved out to Los Angeles. I needed an excuse. So I signed up for an acting program at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Hollywood. Cool. And I took that for about a year. And then got involved with more of the stagecraft side of things. And that started me down stand-up of wanting to perform. And I liked the truthfulness, I guess, in stand-up. And I felt like I had a decent amount to say. And I liked telling it in a funny way. So it worked out well.
And that hasn't changed? You still feel the same way?
Oh, yeah. I have a general rule. If it terrifies you, you should keep doing it. And it scares me, and I am a mess usually every time I have to go on stage, but it's the greatest high when I'm on there. And when you get that first laugh, that's everything.
That's cool.
Everything.
Have you gotten less terrified as time's gone by?
I think they always say fear is another form of just not being prepared. And as I'm generally prepared with my material and or things that you're going to encounter in the situation, whether it be unknowns of how the crowd will react, that fear goes away, that stress. So it definitely has gotten easier. It's always hard when you write something new and you're not sure how people are going to react.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about the fact that stand-up comedians seem to catch a lot of grief or flack about talking about controversial subjects or telling off-color jokes? I mean, I know Chris D'Elia addressed this in his recent Netflix show, and he said, essentially, you're paying us to come sit here and see us talk about these things. So you getting offended is a bit silly. And I have to agree with that. So do you agree that a lot of comedians, feel it's their job to push the proverbial envelope?
I 100% agree that the job is to push the envelope. The greatest comedians are typically, I would say modern comedians, are typically the ones who are talking about things that no one else will talk about and in a voice that might be controversial. You have people like Hannah Gadsby or Tig Notaro, two of my personal favorites right now, that are talking, that are talking in voices that even Bill Burr. I mean, there's I could go on and on. There's tons of comedians who are talking in voices that are non-traditional, and I think it's important to have that. I think it's also important to remember that when you get on stage, even as a comedian, it's not necessarily 100% who you are as a person. A lot of times you're truthful, but a lot of times you're also playing a part that the audience will respond to. So it might be a more heightened version of yourself. Mm-hmm. Carrot Top doesn't walk around with those props all the time, but it's true. And I think when comedians have said things, a lot of times that's been to get a rise to get a reaction, to get a reaction. So should you say terrible things or should you be responsible for what you say? Yes. But should you necessarily be deemed a criminal for saying them? I don't necessarily believe you should.
Well, I'm curious, how did you transition from acting, dancing, and stand-up comedy to being a master electrician?
Oh, I would love to say I had some sort of come to Jesus, but it was purely out of desperation of the recession. That's that's about 80% of it. I actually got into it because I was out here in LA and I had a friend who now has transitioned into my husband, but at the time was a friend, and I was looking for work, and he said, you seem like a pretty badass, hardworking kind of chick. I do this thing and it's great because it's you make your own schedule, and when you're looking to do acting, that's definitely the gigs that you're looking for. And so I did a couple. I think my first show was BlizzCon, which is the big Blizzard Entertainment World of Warcraft convention. And my first day was a 22-hour day. Wow. And I remember sitting up in the catwalk with a very seasoned electrician, and he said, if you can survive today, you can survive any day. And I kind of thought about it. I was like, this sort of feels like a bunch of miscreant, carny kind of people, and a little bit on the edge, but they're so smart, and constantly I'm wowed by people's intelligence, and I just really enjoyed working with my hands and talking to people. And
so how long have you been doing this now?
Now, ever since I've lived in LA, so that would be since about 2008.
Well, so 12 years.
Yeah.
So now you not only do this work that has been primarily a man's world for a very long time, but you've done it pregnant twice, and you've worked how far into your pregnancy?
I actually looked this up because it all blends together. My daughter, who was born in January of 2018, I worked until my 35th week of pregnancy.
Wow.
And then my son, who was just born in March of 2020, I worked till 37 weeks.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you get some odd looks there at the end. And a lot of people, because everyone is so trained, and I would say typically men are so trained to not make comments, like not make any sort of presumptions that a woman is pregnant. But when you're at the 35th, 36th, 30th week, it's pretty obviously a bump. And so I would mess with men that I would work with that didn't know me and say, and be like, oh yeah, I just had a big lunch today, or I had a burrito. And they would give these really awkward side eyes until I admitted to them that I was very, very, very pregnant.
Well, what's something unique about working pregnant that people may not know or realize?
It's actually really good for a woman to continue with whatever behavior they've been accustomed to. People were always really concerned about me picking or lifting or pushing or anything sort of what would be deemed strenuous. Mm-hmm. And as long as, I have to say, I was very fortunate. Both of my pregnancies were without complication, and I was healthy. The babies were all healthy. so this is not a blanket statement, but my doctor both times kept saying, do exactly what you've been doing. So I would walk for miles on site, and I would push and I would pick. And people felt the need to jump in there all the time and say, oh, let me get that for you, or let me pick that up, or and I would always have to remind them, don't worry, guys, I'm in my 30s. If I need help, I'll definitely ask. I know my limitations. So that was sort of, I would say the general takeaway is you can still do and push and be all of the things, just a slightly take it easy.
Very cool. I'm curious, where was the most fun or interesting place that you've actually traveled for your job?
I feel like this question kind of elicits two different things. I last year for a conference, I got to go to Barcelona, they rented me a little Airbnb apartment. And so I really got to live in the city. And that's my ultimate travel dream, is acting as if I live there.
Yeah.
That was really fun. But I would say one of the stranger places that I got to go, and I would say not traditionally you would do an event there, would be a hotel just outside of Page, Arizona, where the Horseshoe Bend of the Grand Canyon is.
Oh, yeah.
So sort of just in general, what a beautiful Utah, Arizona landscape. The gig itself was a wedding at a high-end resort. So the show was sort of funny, and it was with a really great group of people that I was working with. So that was a stranger place. I do a lot of Las Vegas, Orlando.
Well, how often are you traveling most of the time, or is a lot of it in Los Angeles?
It totally varies from year to year, but I would say give or take 70% of what I do is outside of LA.
Well, what do you think is the actual hardest part of career traveling for you?
The hardest part is remembering that life continues while you're gone. There's a idea in general when it's almost like an institutionalization a little bit, where you're gone and your general tasks throughout the day are clothe yourself, feed yourself, go to work, sleep. And then you forget things like, I still have to pay my electrical bill. I still have to pay my phone bill. I have a hard time of not allowing myself to procrastinate on general life demands. Demands. Even though I'm out of town, because I want to go see and do and eat and experience aside from work. And I have to remember there's other things.
And kids you have to tuck in.
Oh, God, the kids. Yeah, yeah. I will say I could not. I'm amazed that people used to do this before the inventions of FaceTime or Zoom or Skype, because the idea that I can stay connected when I'm so disconnected is I don't know if I could do this otherwise. I don't know if I could travel this much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of people did. I think a lot of people sacrificed that to stay with their kids. I mean, we were watching Mad Men recently because we'd never seen the show, and it was a good thing to binge during the current stay-at-home FYI. But it was fascinating to see how much life has actually changed in 60 or 70 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating. I'm not sure if people realize how far we've actually come.
Yeah, I think about, my dad was he traveled often for work when we were kids, and that was a common part of my upbringing. But I also think about the men specifically, or the people that did a lot of touring concerts in the 80s. I mean, you would be gone for months sometimes. Yeah. And your only connection to your family was the phone, and which is awesome. And that's also fantastic technology, but there is something different that you get to see people.
Yeah, agreed.
You get to see your kids. You get to feel like instead of being gone for 3 months and seeing them grow an inch, like that'd be really hard.
I'm curious if working in what's still considered a predominantly male field, you've had to deal with any of the unfortunate Me Too situations.
I've definitely had what I would consider micro-misogyny, whereas I would say, a male walking by you as a female, probably the only one on site, and saying, "Oh, can I get a smile today?" Or "Let me help you carry that," when they haven't asked any other male on my crew if they need help carrying something, and it'll be something, a 35-pound sandbag. I usually snap back and say something to the idea of, if I couldn't do this, I wouldn't be getting paid the same. I would say in general is and not even in specifics, I would say that I have felt like I have needed to prove myself maybe a little bit harder and a little more than necessarily some of the men in the industry, just because you're so hyper conscious and hyper aware of making sure people know you didn't get a job because you're a female, and that there's anything else going on except you're good at what you do. You're just as good. There are strengths and weaknesses to having a multi-gender crew, multi-aged crew, there's such a positive and negative to it. And I think in general, I have seen people get upset when they don't get work, especially in a gig-based world where people feel like maybe you had an advantage because you're a female and somebody likes looking at you and having you on their crew. And I've really had to be very aware and make sure people know I get hired because I'm good at what I do.
Do you feel that struggle, though, is something that is changing for the better and will eventually be equalized?
Absolutely. I think we're definitely on a positive trajectory. I see more women in the industry, of strong, wonderful, intelligent women. I see, as I've done it, although it hasn't been decades, over the last 12 years that I've done this, I've definitely felt a shift. And maybe that's also because I'm getting older, and in general, there's an ageism as well. When you're inevitably or traditionally. Do
you want to be lugging around thousands of feet of cable when you're 45, 50 years old? Do you want to say?
I mean, nobody does when they're, regardless of who you are. You, in general, your body will give out at some point. And I know a lot of guys. I'm 48,
and there's things I just don't want to do anymore, honestly. I'm still pretty active.
Absolutely.
And we rock climb, and I'm fairly fit. But yeah, even I'm feeling like, The other day, someone said to me, "Hey, do you want to come camping with us?" And I said, "Are we camping like on the ground, or are we going to a cabin?"
Or are we glamping?
Yeah, glamping, sure.
No, and I 100% agree. As you get more expertise in your different areas, right? The general goal is to maybe do less of the grunt work, if you will, less of the work, and keep that for the more able-bodied, younger folks. But I also know people that they like that kind of thing. They like going in every day and being really physical, and they're years older than I am, and I think the other thing to remember is it's really important to show how necessary to have those people it is. It's not, there's a lot of glitz and glamour in being the designer or the total the owner, the CEO, the whatever.
Yeah.
But we need all the bits and pieces to make the show happen. So I think it's just as important to be the person who's putting the light on the plot as it is the person who's plugging in the cable that makes that light work. And that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, and I would add, I think it's just as important to be the person plugging in the light as it is the actor who's stepping in front of that light to deliver the lines.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for some reason our culture has become obsessed with this backwards idea that the person delivering the lines or the director are the only people that matter. And it's like, listen up, everyone. Without all of those other people, all of them, you don't have a movie or a TV show or anything like that.
It used to be great. I think people have gotten a little more wise to it, but anytime I would go home, everyone assumed that because I worked in more of a crew capacity, that I probably lived paycheck to paycheck or were just barely squeaking by on ends meet. And I was like, I make a great living off of what I do. I'm comfortable. I was until about 3 weeks ago. We'll talk about that later. But people would buy me drinks and say, "Oh man, that lifestyle, going from show to show must be so hard for you." And I would be like, "Yeah, you can buy me a drink. That's absolutely, it's super hard." But I think my brother had to break it to my mother one day when he's a teacher up in Alaska. And my mom was like, "Oh, I wish Michelle had gotten into something a little bit more traditional." And my brother was like, "She makes more money than I will ever make as a teacher. which is unfortunately, that's a whole other topic.
Yes.
But it's very true.
What advice would you give other women who may want to get into the industry, not just in the entertainment business, but globally, women who are facing down a field perhaps that is male dominated? What advice would you give them?
Knowledge is power. I would say
What do you mean?
learning. I would say educating yourself in general in the field that you're interested in, really, and that's so many different aspects. I'm a huge proponent of continued education and to keep learning, whether that's as a female or as a male. That's neither here nor there.
Agreed.
But as a female, I think it's important to really have your backbone and really know that what you're good at, what your strengths are, keep researching, keep learning, and know that there are unfortunately going to be situations that are going to be really uncomfortable. They're going to happen. It's the rule of, I ride a motorcycle, and the rule of motorcycle riding is you're going to fall. It's not if, but when. So there's going to be situations that are terrible, and they will happen. And it's not if, but when. And it's being strong enough and assured in yourself that there will be light at the end of that tunnel.
That's great advice, and thank you. I'm going to make a little pun here and change gears because you had a little motorcycle accident. Would you like to tell our listeners about that?
I did. I had two. I was actually on my way to work for one of them, and I went to work like a crazy person. They were not bad. The second one, I did scrape off all the skin on my palms. So that was...
And then I went back to work.
And then that was not... That one... that one I went and bartended a Halloween party, I think was what I did.
Missing all your hand skin?
Yeah, well, I just dressed up as Casey Jones, and I put bandages around my hands, and I drank a lot of vodka, and I bartended a Halloween party.
This is why people call you a badass, because you're like, scraped off my hand? Fuck that, I can serve you drinks.
Yeah, exactly, and I don't know why.
Michelle, I gotta be honest with you. I just bow to you because if I scraped off the skin on my hand, I'd be like, okay, just take me to the hospital. I'm not going to podcast now.
Well, I remember because the two accidents happened actually right one after the other, and within I think about a month or two of each other. Clearly, I was not ready to get back on a motorcycle after the first one, and I had, probably. I think I'd braked a little too quickly or whatever the logistics were. But I just remember calling my boyfriend at the time and saying, I need your insurance information for your motorcycle, and being so monotone. And he was like, well, what happened? I was like, I got in a little bit of an accident. And then I walk in the front door, and he's sort of like nonchalantly playing video games or something. And he's like, oh, is everything okay? Like, just kind of asking like how my day was, what happened. And then I dropped to the floor, burst into tears, and I show him that I have no skin on my palms, and he's like, oh my God, like, you made this sound like nothing was wrong, and then you have no arms.
So you went to the hospital after that?
No, of course I didn't. That would be what logical people do. But part of also being your own business is health insurance is not given to you, which is like, that could be a whole other podcast. We talk about Michelle's trials and tribulations with the health insurance.
Yeah, Michelle and half the United States of America.
About to say, I was like, I'm right in the boat. When I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, I had been kicked off my insurance policy. So I actually had to, luckily California is a very kind state, and they have an emergency plan that you can sign up for. But it was a very scary moment to be so excited and see the little plus sign on the pregnancy test and then realize, oh my God, I might have to pay for all of this. And it was very scary.
I have a question for you, Michelle. I like to ask people what they think about the difference between happiness and contentment. I personally believe that happiness is an emotion, contentment is a state of being, and that we live in a world that unfortunately, and I mean this unfortunately, tries to market to people that if they're not happy all the time, they're doing something wrong and they should pursue a life. Just be happy. Don't worry. Be happy. Blah, 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 blah. I think what people should be talking about is achieving a state of contentment where you appreciate the things in your life, you love the opportunities you've been given, you appreciate your health, especially in today's day and age, and you understand that happiness is something that happens over and over again. It is not something human beings, I believe, can enjoy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, I think I would go down the same path that you're sort of leading down, which I think contentment and happiness are not an either or. I think they're an and situation. I think you can be generally happy and not content. I think you can be content and not always be happy. I think they're sort of talking about two positive versions of our existence. I think you can have good days and bad days. And I think I would agree with you in general. If you're not happy, then you need to quit your job and move and break up with your partner and go do something else. But as somebody my relationships have never been all roses and flowers.
They never are. And this bullshit story we tell people through romantic comedy movies where like you meet, you fall in love, it's magical and incredible, and then you're just happy forever. It's horse shit. I mean,
yeah.
You guys have been together.
Then you go on a shit ton of antidepressants and you go eat, pray, love in India somewhere and have a existential crisis.
Another whole podcast would be, and maybe we will do one where I'll bring in some people and do like a little panel talking about what relationships are actually really like, because we've been together 14 years. How long have you guys been together?
We've been together 2008, so 12 years.
Yeah. So, there's ups and downs. There's all the stuff you endure. There's family. There's death. There's marriage. There's, all this stuff. So, yeah, it's
Anytime
interesting.
someone says, oh, my partner and I never fight, I'm always like, but you do. And if you're not, like, that almost in a twisted way, I'm like, that sounds so boring. That sounds so complacent that I don't think I could necessarily. But yeah, I would, to go back to your original question and say happiness versus contentment, I think I've always, as somebody who has taken a non-traditional path in many aspects, I went straight from high school and I went basically straight into the work world. I did about a year and a half of traditional university and then realized what was I was learning there. Although I love learning, I didn't have the money to spend on it. And I wanted to get into acting. I wanted to get into the entertainment. And the best way I could do that was just hit it head on and see what I could do.
Yeah.
And I needed to work. I needed to make money. I didn't have the luxury at the time to live off of student loans. Well, I couldn't get approved for student loans, but again, another podcast. So my non-traditional path, I didn't go straight from high school to college to career. And so I've always been a little jealous of the content that some people find in that they knew what they wanted to do when they were in high school.
Yeah. And
they went to college and they achieved that goal and they got the 2.5 children that they wanted and they met their partner in college or right after. And I think that there's a beautiful story in that. And that
fuck them.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
F them. But being content with that lifestyle, that's great too. It's not what my life has been and it's not what my story has been, but I think being content, and you don't have to be 100% happy with that.
I got to tell you a quick story. I met a guy many years ago when I was in college. He was a doctor, and at the time I was sitting on a small boat. I was hanging out with my family like people do at a lake and whatever, and we got chatting and he asked me what I did for a living. So I told him I was an artist and the struggles that come along with that life. And anyway, at some point he says, "Man, I really envy you." And I was surprised. And I said, "Why is that? You're a doctor and you have so much money. And I mean, look, we're on your boat. I've been riding your wave runner. It's so great that you have all this." And he said, "No, I had this path laid out for me, do this, do that, buy this, buy that. And now I'm in my 40s and I'm not only bored out of my mind, but I don't love my job. I've got kids and a house to support and all these bills. And you live a very exciting life because you're following your heart. And that's freedom. That's everything." And I've never forgotten that. I mean, I know that we all have our own path in life, but I will always believe that being true to your heart is the most important thing.
Yeah, I definitely noticed in my friends that took the more traditional paths that there would be sort of a little bit of a jealousy, a little twang of comment in their voice when they'd be like, "Oh, where are you? What are you doing? Oh, that must be so cool. That must be so great." Because they are, they're still living in the same city that we grew up in, which is a major metropolitan city. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And there's also nothing wrong in going where you grew up. But
well, there's nothing wrong with any of it. It's just people make choices,
and it's just different.
I just think people need to be honest with themselves, right? I mean, it's all about prioritizing what you want. If you see someone like me who travels a lot and you want to travel, well, I mean, it really is simple, right? You have to make travel a priority and stop making excuses. For most people, it's just not that hard. It's about just being honest.
Or it's also just remember, the grass is always greener as well.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff about traveling that's difficult,
Yeah, like something I'm sure we'll touch on is, it's awesome I get to travel a lot, but I do sacrifice tucking my kids in every night. I one time had a friend of mine come visit, and I think her son at the time was about 18 months old. And she was like, this is the longest I've ever been away from him. And there was a part of me that was like shocked, because I think I left for my first gig post having my daughter when I was 2 months. She was about 2 months old, and I left for probably 10 days. And so hearing her say that, I was shocked. But she's has a job at home, and that's a very normal thing. The fact that I left.
Well, Michelle, let me ask you, what was it like going back to work after you had your first child, your daughter?
I went back to work when she was about 4 weeks old.
Wow.
So I did not take the 12 weeks that we are so graciously given in the United States, because my work is from job to job. I don't have a through money. I totally am self-employed. So when the job is there, there's a general drive to work it. And
was it difficult for you being away from Riley?
It's about 50-50 as somebody who enjoys working. I was definitely missing things. I missed, when she sat up for the first time. I missed when she smiled for the first time. Again, I saw those things through the phone, through videos. And I got to exercise not just the mommy part of myself. I still got to, do the math problems and talk to people and not necessarily be neck deep in spit up and dirty diapers. So I needed that. I needed that because I like working, and I like working with people, and I can't stay at home all the time. This whole coronavirus quarantine is particularly hard on me, because I am a very active person, and to tell me to stay at home, it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Well, let's talk about travel, because you mentioned it a little bit. When did you discover you liked to travel, do you think?
When I was really young, we didn't grow up around a lot of family. My mother's family are all in Michigan. My dad's family are all in New England. So we traveled often to go see family. And my dad had a plane. He was a pilot. He had a small plane. So we would travel often.
Was there any part of you that wanted to be a pilot?
Oh, there's still a part of me. I always toy with the idea of going to flight school. And for one reason or another, life, right, gets in the way, and I don't do it. And I think also a little bit of to own a plane is very expensive.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it's one thing when you get your motorcycle license and you can maybe buy a motorcycle for $1,000. You can't buy a Cessna for $1,000.
And if you did, I wouldn't fly it. Yeah.
That's it. I was like, it probably would be a bicycle with some feathers attached. A nice bicycle.
Where are some of your favorite places that you've actually traveled?
I always believe it's not necessarily where you go, but who you go with. So I've been to some really boring places that I've had a blast in because of who I was there with. And I would say I haven't traveled internationally as much as a lot of people. I've done all 50 states. Some of them a bunch of times over. But I would say Alaska is one of those places I feel like you can only see there. There's a lot of places where you can kind of see rainforest-ish environments, but it's just such a beautiful and strange place. And where else? I was technically, my parents were living in Paris when I was conceived. So I like to say that I was made in France, born in the USA. So I think that's a part of myself. So there's a lot of Europe that I want to go see more of it. I've only really seen.
Has the majority of your travel been with other people then?
Yes. I would say.
Have you ever gone anywhere by yourself completely? Just gotten away, just you?
Not for pleasure. I've gone places by myself for work, which is interesting and definitely more lonely. But you find your quieter moments, I would say. But I've always thought about taking a trip by myself. I have not done that. I like experiencing. One of my most memorable trips, I would say, I did a cross-country road trip with one of my best friends from high school. And when we were 22, 23. So this was kind of before you Google Maps, and I don't even know if we had a smartphone. I think we still had like a Razor flip phone.
Flip phone, yeah.
And we had a guide that we used that said, like, it was the non-traditional road trip guide to America. So it told you about hostels you could stay at and, not necessarily the 5-star restaurants, but more kitschier places you could eat at and those kind of activities. And we had a lot of stories that probably would terrify our parents if we had told them at the time.
Do you have a favorite travel toy? Something you always take with you?
I would say my number one recommendation is to invest in a good suitcase, whatever that is. I've had crappy suitcases, and
it sucks.
Like all of a sudden one cracks off in the middle of you trying to like shove it into the overhead bin, and then you just look at the guy next to you and you're like, that was weird.
Or you're pulling it through the middle of the airport and your wheel falls off and it's flying off down there and you're like, shit.
Exactly. So I would say a good suitcase would be the and it feels like it's an investment, but it's totally worth it.
I always tell people a really good pair of shoes, good walking shoes.
Really good pair of shoes. And then one of those packable duffel bags that you can get that are like the really thin nylon. Because I always throw one of those in my bag because inevitably I go somewhere and I've perfectly packed my suitcase. And then I go somewhere and I want to buy something and it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And I get very sad. And I like having, not necessarily buying knickknacks and trinkets, but I love buying something like a bracelet or a sweater or anything that I remember. Although it might not say "Welcome to Las Vegas," I remember I bought that there. Yeah. It's just a little nice memory to myself.
I'm going to run down a list of favorites and you will shotgun fire these at you in first response. You ready?
Okay.
Here we go. What's your favorite food?
Spaghetti.
What's your favorite smell?
Summer.
What's your favorite sound?
Oh, my daughter. Oh God, and my son. Oh God.
Both. Favorite movie?
He's new.
Favorite movie?
Oh gosh, I don't have one. This one always gets me.
What's a movie you love?
What's a movie that I love?
It
would be like a Incredibles, like a Pixar movie.
Favorite book?
Unbearable Lightness of Being.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs, but I have 2 cats, so that's weird.
Second favorite food?
Home cooking. That's the only thing I can think of.
Favorite breakfast cereal?
Panda peanut butter puffs.
All right. Congratulations. You pass.
Thanks. Woo! What's your favorite band or what's your favorite? I can never.
Oh, I forgot that. What's your favorite band?
Oh, God damn it. My favorite band, I would say, I've liked them, is The Faint.
Huh. I don't know them.
Yeah, they're like Saddle Creek Records. They like dancey, rocky stuff.
Are you the person that you always wanted to be when you were a kid? And if not, what are you still working on to try and become her?
I think so. I think there's always room for improvement. But I would generally, who I wanted to be as a kid was true to myself, enjoyed the simple things, the everyday. And I think I generally do that unless I'm getting, stressing myself out, which is just a nasty word for being really afraid of doing something. And I think, I would say little me would be pretty proud of big me. Like to be on stage more often.
I was going to say, is there something that you want to achieve that you haven't yet?
Yeah, I would say, really taking time to put importance on the creative side of myself. And I would like to remind myself that that's a really important part of who I am and what I like doing.
What do you hope the world will get out of listening to your podcast episode?
She's hilarious. That's not what anyone's going to get. Yeah, women in general, they can do it. You can do it too. You can do it all. I never met before myself there wasn't a lot of women that I could speak to that were in my industry that wanted both things. They wanted the family and they wanted to keep working in the industry. There's a lot of men, but when I was trying to figure out how to be pregnant and work in the industry, there wasn't a lot of people I could go to for advice. So it's just a reminder, you don't have to choose. You can have the family, and it can be strange and non-traditional. And going back to work as a brand new mom, that shocked people, And so just knowing that's you can shock people, and that can be, you have to ignore some of the comments sometimes of how hard it must be to go back. We need to talk about that for a second.
Okay.
So first off, we need to stop thinking of men that are being fathers and stay-at-home dads as if they're doing something that hasn't been done for many years, because the amount of people that would be like, oh, Danny is doing this amazing thing by graciously staying home with your daughter. And I was like, no, he's 50% of this problem. Like, I've just taken we're slightly more non-traditional in the fact that I go to work and he pretty much, he has his own job, and he is very fortunate that he can take our daughter.
And he will be on the podcast in a future episode.
Yes, I'm sure he'll talk about that.
He'll tell his side of this story, but you go ahead.
Exactly. He loves every second of it and wouldn't change a thing. But it was, I would talk to people and they would feel the need to say, oh, it must be so hard for you. It must be so hard for you to go to work. And there's a guilt that you feel when it's not that hard. There's definitely moments where it is hard. But as a whole, I loved going back to work, and feeling guilty that I liked that was, it felt wrong.
So what would you say to women who also like to work and want to go back to work? Not to feel guilty, right? Yeah,
do it. There's so many versions of motherhood. There's so many versions of being a parent that are equally, look, we're going to fuck them up, right? Everybody fucks up their kids to one capacity or another. You just hope that you've minimized the amount of
fuckery,
of longevity, of the amount of scars that you've created. So I think it's just reminding women that the stay-at-home mom, that's an amazing, beautiful version of motherhood, but it's not the path for everyone. And there's so many different versions of it, and what you can do versus what somebody else can do. Like, look, I've been home now for 6 weeks with my daughter and my new son, and I tell you what, when are they going to open up live events again? Because
it's very funny.
It's getting really...
As a woman and a mom, what do you want to see the future of the world look like?
I would want the future of the world to look more even, more equal. Aside from, I want my daughter and my son to have all of the opportunities that I had, that a lot of people I know, and I want everybody to see that. I want things to be more universal. I would say I would like universal healthcare and the chance for my kids to go to college if they want to, and that it's not all on whether my husband and I can afford it. I want them, if they want to learn and whatever they want to learn and whatever they want to get into and whoever they want to be, that they have, I just hope it's equal. I hope they can look at anything and go, I can be a doctor, but I can also work at Trader Joe's, and everybody sees that as just great. You've made your choice.
It's kind of a Star Trek world.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody has everyone has their important role to play, no matter if you're the person who, I hate using examples of like gross jobs, like the guy who cleans out porta potties, but like those are just as important as
the doctor who performs surgery on people. Absolutely.
Yeah, we need those things. We need all of those things, and
unless we have robots that do it all, we are all, exactly. as the famous quote goes, we're all passengers on spaceship Earth.
Yeah, it's true, and just making sure that really seeing a world where people are, judged for nothing. You just kind of get to talk to people as people, and everyone is on a level playing field. That would be a amazing world to live in.
I agree. I think people's desire to have a world like that will create a much better world.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting what a time like what we're currently in with the pandemic as we're talking through it. What it sort of changes a lot of the conversations that people are having. People are having much more time at home with families, and how that's going to shift our society and
our priorities.
Yeah. And I would say I'm pleasantly surprised to see as a society that we haven't immediately gone to looting. Like every movie says that it would happen in a pandemic or a world crisis of any kind. But you do see a lot of good in people.
What's the most important thing you want to instill in your children?
I would say the one thing above all else that I would want to instill, and I think the thing that keeps me up at night as far as what I try and teach them every day, is to just be a kind person, to be somebody who listens and pays attention and talks, listens to people's stories and just generally good. And I think that if we can all start at that level, then anything else becomes pretty easy, if they just have a good intention as they wake up in the morning and they just want to approach the world with a goodness, there's a lot that can come from that.
What do you think is the meaning of life?
Oh, good gracious. The meaning of life. I don't know. I always fight with the idea of, when you're on your deathbed, what do you want to be remembered by? And I sort of lump those together with what's the meaning of life. And I think it's just love in a certain way. The meaning of life is just to try and love as fiercely, love the people, love what you do, find some sort of happiness in the everyday moments, but in general, just kind of a love.
Michelle, the last thing I like to do with my guests, as you may well know, is 299 philosophical and life questions with Moonbird. You get to pick 2 numbers, and I'll read you those questions. What are your 2 numbers?
I will pick 2.
Ooh.
And I will pick 44.
All right. Number 2, what's your guilty pleasure?
Currently, it's the chocolate-covered raisins tub that I purchased at Costco. But I would say the best I can think of is I love to go thrifting. It's kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily a guilty pleasure, but I just love getting that deal. I love finding a fancy piece of clothing at a thrift store, and somebody's like, oh, I like those shoes. And I'm like, oh, I spent $3 on them. I don't know if that's necessarily a guilty pleasure, but it's definitely something that I do on an off day.
Number 44, what's something your past relationship taught you?
I would say be more confident in who I am and all of the great things about myself. You don't need to change. Most of my past relationships, I was pretty young, and I felt the need to be more chameleon and, not do things or do things for that partner that were against who I was. And I would say, be confident in the fact that you, Michelle, are awesome, and you'll figure that out when you're in your 30s. But that's also that's just a, I think time, age, I think that was more just allowing myself to not, there's something when you turn 30, you just stop giving a fuck.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's actually,
and that has just gotten stronger as now I'm 35, I'm going to be 36. I feel like I give less of a fuck.
And you will continue to give less of a fuck into your 40s until you finally go, yeah, man, I'm just me. And if you don't like me, go away. I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, I clearly know how to entertain myself alone in my house. So I don't really need any of you people. That's not true. I need people. This is so terrible. I mean, thank God we have Zoom and FaceTime. And, well, I love spending all this time. I love, because I don't get this. As long as I ignore the part of the fact that I have no job after this is done, as long as I don't think about that, I do love this time. I love that I've been able to sort of see how the other half lives a little bit as far as staying home all the time when somebody like me travels all the time.
If people want to see you on stage, are you going to be giving any comedy shows this year once things get back to normal?
I am. Yes, I am writing. I've had a little bit of extra free time. So I've been writing. Yeah, so that's definitely, I have every intention of reaching out.
And if they want to find out when you're going to be performing, how do they do that?
Probably the best way on the Instagram. I am at Cubed Coffee, CUBED
You heard it here, at Cubed Coffee. Michelle Marie Maxwell. You can find out about her show schedule once things get back to normal here in the world.
Yes.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming in. You're awesome. I can't wait to see you up on stage again. And as always, have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Friends and listeners, next time on Memories of a Moonbird, it's another Moonbird. As a veteran pilot, he's flown more miles and been to more places on Earth than most human beings will ever go. Here to talk about what it's like to fly a jet, share some crazy stories from his years in the skies, and tell us all about some of the coolest places on the planet. Get ready for a fun ride with Captain Robin Liebman. And until then, if you'd like more Moonbird in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media at Memories of a Moonbird. Stay safe.